Before we continue this conversation, did you bring enough body bags? The three of them froze on my driveway. The woman's smile vanished. The heavy man's hand twitched toward his belt. The clipboard guy actually took a step back. I stood on my porch, shotgun resting against the rail. Not aiming, just existing. Making a point, the way my grandfather Earl taught me. Quiet, direct, final. You come onto my land, I said, voice calm as Sunday morning, claiming I owe you $100,000 for violations my grandfather never committed on property you have zero jurisdiction over, and you think I'm just going to nod and smile? The woman tried to recover. Mr. Banner, we have documentation. You have lies, I interrupted. And about 5 seconds before I decide whether you're trespassing or threatening, the heavy man muttered something about calling the sheriff. Good idea, I said. Ask for Deputy Ramirez. Tell him Cody Banner says 3 people showed up making threats about taking his land. The silence that followed was thick enough to choke on. Then the woman's mask cracked. Just for a second. Long enough for me to see what was underneath. Not authority. Desperation. This isn't over, she said, backing toward their SUV. No, I agreed. It's just getting started. They drove off, dust rising behind them like smoke from a warning shot. I stood there, a long moment, shotgun still on the rail, watching the road long after they disappeared. That's when I knew. My grandfather hadn't just left me 140 acres of Texas dirt. He'd left me a war, and the enemy had just fired the first round. The smell hit me first when I stepped out of my truck that morning. Sun-baked cedar, dry grass, and that particular Texas dust that settles into your bones like a second skin. Home. Banner Ranch. 140 acres of scrub oak, limestone outcroppings, and the only real freedom I'd known in 42 years. Most folks would have looked at that place and seen a wreck. Sagging porch, roof patched with whatever Grandpa Earl had lying around. Fences leaning like tired old men. Barn doors that didn't close unless you kicked them twice. Me? I saw a promise. I'd spent 20 years in Army Recon Iraq, Afghanistan, 3 tours that taught me how to read terrain that lied, and people who lied worse. Came home to Austin with a Purple Heart, a limp that flared up when it rained, and the realization that cities made my skin crawl. When Earl died 6 months ago, heart attack while fixing a fence post at 78, he left me everything. The land, the debts, the memories. And one piece of advice scrawled in his will: don't let them redraw the lines, boy. Truth lives in the South well. At the time, I'd thought it was old man poetry. Earl always had a way with cryptic warnings. Now, unloading my duffel and surveying equipment from the truck, I wondered if he'd seen something coming. The house sat on a slow rise overlooking the south pasture, a spot Earl called the Ridge of Truth. Never understood why when I was a kid. Now, looking out across land that had been in our family since 1952, it felt like the last honest square mile in a world that traded honesty for paperwork. I spent the first 2 days clearing junk from the barn. Old tack gear, rusted tools. A coffee can full of screws Earl refused to throw away. Then I found it, wedged behind a cracked cedar beam. A leather notebook. Dry, brittle, edges curled like old leaves. Inside, Earl's handwriting blocky, precise, careful, well-depth records, flow measurements, drought notes, normal ranch stuff, until I reached the back page, a hand-drawn map. The southern boundary, fence lines, pastures, and circled in thick red pencil, the south well. Below it, a note. If someone comes claiming land that ain't theirs, check the well. Truth lives there. My chest tightened. Earl wasn't sentimental. Didn't leave riddles. Didn't speak in metaphors. If he wrote something down, it meant something. I walked outside, leaning against a fence post. He'd driven into the earth back in 1952, same year. He'd bought this land with money. He'd saved working pipeline jobs for 15 years. The sun was high, hot enough to bake dust into clay. For a moment, I wondered what exactly Earl had seen coming. He always had a strange sense about people, about danger. He used to say, "Freedom ain't a gift, boy, it's a fight, and fights come in all shapes." I'd thought he meant burglars, or trespassers, or drunk ranch hands. Now, looking at that map and the way he'd circled the South, well, I felt something different. A warning. A message he'd left for the day he wasn't here to say it himself. The ranch was quiet. Too quiet. Just cicadas humming, wind scratching, dry grass, and that map whispering a truth I wouldn't fully understand until much later. Standing there with dust settling on my boots and memories crowding my head, I made myself a promise. Whatever storm was coming, I wasn't giving up a single inch of Earl Banner's land. Not to anyone, not ever. As it turned out, the storm was already on its way. The storm didn't arrive with thunder. It came on 4 wheels. Little past 9 a.m., on my 3rd day back, I was behind the barn clearing old boards when I heard it. Tires on gravel. Too smooth, too quiet, not a ranch truck. I stepped around the side, wiping sweat with the back of my glove. A silver SUV. Washed so clean it didn't belong within 50 miles of dirt. Tinted windows. Chrome trim. Before the engine stopped, instinct kicked in. 3 targets. Driver door, passenger door, rear left, spacing sloppy, footsteps heavy, no coordination, not trained, not dangerous. Unless you underestimated the kind of power they try to flex. The first one out was a woman. Tall, stiff posture, bleached blonde hair, cut sharp as a razor, white blazer that probably cost more than my truck payment. Behind her, heavy-set man with that retired cop swagger, still clinging to him like cigarette smoke. Third, twitchy clipboard type, hugging a folder like a life vest. I walked toward them, slow, steady, letting them see the crowbar in my hand, not as threat, just reminder of where they were standing. The woman took the lead. "Mr. Banner? That's me. What can I help you folks with?" Her smile had all the warmth of a rattlesnake in January. "I'm Karen Sloan, president of Prairie Trails Homeowners Association." I didn't shake her hand. "That so? Well, this land isn't part of your HOA." Her smile twitched. "I'm afraid you're mistaken." She nodded at clipboard man. He opened his folder immediately, words rehearsed. "According to our records, this parcel has been under Prairie Trails extended jurisdiction since 2012. I chuckled. "Try again?" Karen didn't blink. "We have documentation showing your grandfather failed to comply with mandatory landscaping and safety ordinances for over a decade." She paused for dramatic effect. The accumulated fines total $100,000. The heavy man Murphy, I'd learn later, crossed his arms like he expected me to collapse under the weight of their nonsense. I didn't. 100,000, I said. "You folks sell comedy tickets on the weekend?" Karen's smile vanished. "You have 30 days to remit payment, or the association will move to acquire the property through legal forfeiture." She stepped closer. "This land is now under our authority, soldier." That last word was meant to sting. It didn't. It just flipped a switch inside me. "Wrong battlefield," I said quietly, "and wrong kind of soldier." I turned and walked away, up the porch steps, through the screen door, didn't raise my voice, didn't slam anything, just reached for the 12 gauge on the wall rack, then stepped back outside. Calm. Relaxed. Shotgun held low, pointed at dirt. Not aiming, just existing. Karen froze. Murphy stiffened. Clipboard guy nearly swallowed his tongue. I rested the barrel against the porch rail and said in the same tone you'd use to ask someone to pass the salt, "Before we continue this conversation, did you bring enough body bags?" The silence that followed was thick as wet cement. Murphy's hands lifted an inch. Clipboard guy started backing up without being told. Karen's face drained of color. "That won't be necessary," she stammered. "No," I said. "I don't think it will." They backed away slow. Real slow. Like they'd finally realized property lines weren't just on paper, they were in the bones of the people who lived behind them. Once they reached the SUV, Karen rolled down her window and hissed, "You'll regret this. We know how to deal with people like you." I leaned one elbow on the post. "Yeah," I said. "I bet you do." They peeled off, gravel spitting behind them like buckshot. The dust hadn't even settled when I pulled my phone from my pocket, hit record, and called the sheriff's department, because I knew exactly what had just happened. This wasn't a misunderstanding, wasn't neighbor trouble. It was a test. A probing attack to see how easy I'd fold. And men like Earl Banner didn't raise grandsons who folded. Not for $100,000, not for an HOA, not for anyone. Trouble never shows up alone. The morning after Karen's visit, I figured I'd earned a quiet breakfast. Black coffee, leftover biscuits, sunrise that made the south pasture glow like hammered copper. Didn't even finish the second sip. A knock hit my door. Sharp. Fast. Official. I opened it. 2 men in reflective vests. Clipboards. Utility belts. Neither looked like they'd done real work in years. The older one held out a badge in a plastic sleeve. City code enforcement. We received complaints about unsafe structures and unregistered water usage. I stared at him. From who? He didn't answer. Didn't have to. Behind them, parked by the road, white SUV with government plates. Another vehicle circling slow beyond the fence line. Animal control, maybe fire marshal. Moving too slow, too deliberate. This wasn't a visit. This was a bureaucracy blitz. Before I could say a word, the younger inspector shoved a packet at me. Stapled thick, fresh, photographic evidence, he said. I flipped through it. Photos of my north fence, the well pump, the hay shed. Then I stopped cold. A photo of the tack room from the inside, taken from the back corner, facing the wall with the bridles and saddle racks. The tack room I kept padlocked. Always. I felt something cold settle behind my ribs. "You boys want to tell me how you got this picture?" The younger one blinked. The older one didn't react at all. "As we said, sir, we received these from the complainants." Complainants. Right. HOA Karen and her clipboard jockeys. Every inch of my land had been photographed. Violated. Mapped. Indexed. And they were using it to weaponize the rulebook. Under Section 14B, the older inspector continued monotone. "We need to inspect any outbuildings, wells, pumps, wiring, and permanent structures on site." I stepped aside. "Fine, but I walk with you." We started with the barn. To them, it probably looked like a weathered building held together with nails and stubbornness. To me, it was the place Earl slept during storm nights to make sure the roof didn't get lonely. The inspectors didn't see any of that. They just saw boxes to tick. They took notes on dust, on boards, on the distance between beams. The younger one photographed a tractor tire like it was a bomb. By the time we looped back toward the house, another city truck had rolled past the gate, slowing just long enough for the driver to stare before moving on. Different agency, same mission. Blanket pressure, full surround. The older inspector peeled a yellow sticker from his pad and slapped it onto my barn door. "You have 2 weeks to correct all listed violations or additional penalties will accrue." Then they got in their SUV and drove off without a goodbye. I pulled the notice from the barn, held it in my hand. The paper was warm from the sun. Pre-printed yesterday, not written today, not updated after inspection, meaning the decision had been made before they arrived. This wasn't enforcement. This was entrapment by design. HOA wanted me drowning in fines, crushed by codes, suffocated by paperwork, until surrender seemed easier than fighting. But they'd miscalculated something important. Recon doesn't fold. We observe. We adapt. We plan. I folded that yellow notice, slid it into my back pocket, grabbed my keys, and headed for my truck. If they wanted to use documents to squeeze me, fine. I was going to Blanco County Records to find the document they hoped I'd never see, the one Earl tried to warn me about. Blanco County Courthouse sits in one of those old stone buildings built to survive cattle rustlers, flash floods, and 3 different governments. Floors creak, coffee's burnt, air smells like toner, sun-baked paper, and resignation. Exactly the kind of place where land gets stolen quietly. I pushed through the front doors, boots echoing on tile. Stepped to the records counter where a woman in a floral blouse sat behind thick glass, reading glasses low on her nose. The universal sign of someone who'd seen every kind of nonsense imaginable. Morning. Name's Cody Banner. I need the parcel maps for Banner Ranch. Full cadastral history. Her fingers clicked across the keyboard. Then, her eyebrows dipped. Oh, Banner. Not a question. Recognition. She clicked again, slower this time. This parcel has pending modification. My jaw tightened. Modification by who? She turned the monitor halfway so I could see. There it was. My 140 acres outlined in gray, and over it, a second outline. Bold. Bright red. But it wasn't a clean overlay. Wasn't a simple expansion. The red line sat on top of my land like a parasite feeding on its host. Text beside it read, Prairie Trails HOA, Transition Zone, Pending Integration. Integration. Pretty word for annexation. Ma'am, I said slowly, when was this filed? She checked the timestamp. 3 weeks ago. 3 weeks before I moved back. Before I unlocked the front door. Before HOA even pretended to meet me. Meaning the ambush had been planned long before Karen took her first step on my driveway. Who filed it? She lowered her voice, looking around like sharing state secrets. A private consultant. Pine and Mirror Strategies. Of course. Zoning manipulation. HOA boundary engineering. Paperwork warfare. But the part that made my pulse spike was the map itself. The red boundary line didn't follow natural borders. Didn't run straight like survey lines usually do. It bent. A smooth curve. Too intentional for chance. It looped through my north pasture, skirted the barn, drifted along the windmill, and then it did something that stopped me cold. It swooped directly over the southern well, the exact spot Grandpa Earl had marked on his hand-drawn map. Not avoiding it, not clipping it, swallowing it whole. Like whoever drew the new line knew exactly what was buried there. What about this curve? I asked, tapping the red arc. The clerk squinted. That's unusual. Boundary expansions are done by straight-line projections. Someone manually adjusted this. Someone, meaning Pine and Mirror, Karen, or both. They knew about the well, knew about Earl's mark, knew something they didn't want me to know. She printed every document she could. Maps, signatures, timestamps. The stack was thick, warm from the printer, heavy as a brick of C4. Dangerous in the wrong hands, even more dangerous in mine. Walking out into the Texas heat, I sat in my truck and studied the top page. The new HOA zone didn't expand around my land. It choked it, wrapped it, redrew it, and at the center of that red ring, the southern well. Earl didn't talk much, didn't leave letters, didn't leave apologies, but he left that map. And if HOA wanted that well so badly they bent county lines around it, then whatever was down there wasn't just important. It was dangerous. I slid the papers onto the passenger seat, started the engine, and pulled out of the lot. If they thought drawing lines on a map would scare me, they'd forgotten one thing. Lines only matter to people who stay inside them. And I was never that kind of man. The ride back from county records was quiet, but inside my truck, my thoughts were loud. HOA wanted the southern well. They'd twisted county lines like balloon animals just to swallow it. That alone told me one thing. They weren't done. By the time I pulled back onto the ranch, the sun had settled into a lazy arc over the pastures. That's when I saw him. A beat-up blue pickup. Older Ford model, parked just outside my east fence line. A man stood next to it, one hand lifted to shade his eyes as he looked toward the house. He waved when he spotted me. Easy, friendly. Howdy. I stepped out of my truck, slow, boots hitting dirt with a thud, didn't wave back. He started toward me. Casual. No rush. Name's Lewis Carter. I'm your neighbor up the ridge. Figured I'd say hello. Up the ridge. That phrase rolled around my skull like a loose BB. I knew that ridge. 5 acres of overgrown cedar scrub. No power lines. No driveways, no recent sales, but I didn't show it on my face. Well, welcome to the neighborhood, I guess. He looked like he'd been carved out of Texas dirt. Tan skin, weathered hands, jeans dusty at the knees. Too normal, too ranch hand. Almost like someone was trying to imitate what they thought a country neighbor should look like. People can fake friendliness, but boots don't lie. His were barely scuffed. "You've been fixing up the place," Lewis said, glancing toward the barn. "Looks good." Earl Banner was a legend out here. That name Earl cut through me. "You knew my granddad?" "Not personally. Folks talked about him at the feed store sometimes." He said it casually. Too casually. I let that sit. Lewis kept talking. Smooth. Practiced. "You need a hand with fencing? I'm decent with barbed wire. Or if you need help with electrical, I did a stint apprenticing for a guy in Blanco. Convenient skill set. Maybe a little too convenient." "I got it handled," I said. "But thanks." He nodded, unfazed. "You mind if I ask, did the county give you trouble? I saw you driving that way earlier." The hairs on the back of my neck stirred. He shouldn't have known that, not unless he'd been watching the road. But he smiled politely, rocking on his heels like we were talking about football scores. "A lot of folks around here getting hit with inspections. HOAs expanding boundaries. Messy stuff." Another red flag. He knew way too much, way too soon. I played dumb. "Haven't heard much about that." Lewis shrugged. "Well, if you need anything, holler. I'm close by." He walked back to his truck. I watched the way he moved. Relaxed gait, but shoulders tight. Back muscles too controlled for a casual ranch hand. Not a civilian walk, not a rancher's walk. More like someone trained to move quietly than pretending to move loud. He climbed into his truck, rolled down the window. "Oh, by the way, if you ever need help with old well maps, I'm pretty good with surveying. Did some of that in the Guard." There it was. The hook. Well, maps, surveying, Guard. 3 things he shouldn't have mentioned in the same sentence, not unless he somehow knew exactly what I'd found in Earl's notebook. I forced a polite smile. Good to know. He drove off, dust kicking behind his truck like a comet tail. I stood there long after he disappeared over the ridge. Lewis Carter wasn't who he said he was. Not even close. Boots too clean, knowledge too specific, timing too perfect, and the way he brought up the well that wasn't coincidence. Someone had stitched him into this story like a patch where the fabric was ripping. Someone desperate to watch me up close. Maybe get close to something on my land. I walked back toward the barn, sun behind me casting my shadow long across the dirt. I didn't know who sent Lewis, but I knew why he came. Eyes on target. Proximity. Access. Not friend, not neighbor. A spy. A mole. A smiling snake in borrowed boots. And I had every intention of smoking him out. Lewis didn't come back the next day, or the day after. But someone did, and they didn't bother knocking. By the 3rd night, the ranch felt wrong. Animals sense trouble before people do. My mare paced the corral, restless. Cattle huddled close instead of spreading out, and the blue heeler I'd borrowed from my neighbor refused to leave the porch, just stared at the tree line, teeth barely showing, instinct talking. Something was coming. So, I set the trap. Inside the barn, tack room normally padlocked tight, I left a single piece of bait. A decoy notebook, same color. Same leather cover as Grandpa Earl's well map journal, set on a shelf where any intruder with half a brain would see it. The real notebook was locked inside a steel cabinet under my bed. The decoy held 3 blank pages and a rattlesnake shed for good luck. Then I mounted motion sensors along the fence line, set a thermal cam in the loft, and went to bed with my boots close. Recon rule: don't hunt the snake. Let the snake hunt what you want it to bite. The alarm tripped at 1:42 a.m. Short chime. South barn. I moved fast. Silent. Didn't need a flashlight, the moon was bright as bone dust. I approached low, behind the old plow. Light flickered through the barn slats. Someone was inside. No 2 someones. One silhouette pried at the tack room lock. The other rummaged through storage bins. Then the tack room intruder stepped into view, flashlight grazing his face. Lewis, the friendly neighbor. Figures. I stepped out from cover, racked the shotgun. The sound cracked the night in half. Both silhouettes froze. The rummager heavier one bolted immediately, sprinting around the far side of the barn. I caught the footfalls, the lumbering cadence, the way the ground shook under each step. Too heavy for a pro, too sloppy for law enforcement. Probably Murphy, Karen's pet bulldog. Lewis didn't run, not at first. He turned his head just enough for me to see his jaw tighten, the calculation behind the eyes. Then he sprinted for the tree line. I let the heavy one go. I wanted the one with brains. I chased Lewis across the yard. Dirt kicked up in gray clouds. The moon lit everything. He didn't know the terrain, didn't see the irrigation ditch. He jumped, came up short. I tackled him midair. We slammed into dirt, rolled, fought. He swung wild city punches, untrained elbows. I pinned him with a knee and pressed the shotgun across his shoulders. Don't move. He froze, but muscles stayed tense, coiled. Lewis, I said calmly, you want to explain why you're sneaking around my barn at 2 in the damn morning? He didn't answer, so I dragged his backpack into the moonlight and unzipped it. Inside, printed photos of my tack room from the inside, county plat maps and well-lined diagrams, laminated copy of my south property line, bolt cutters, crowbar, USB drive, and one sheet stamped, Prairie Trails HOA, authorized entry, administrative order, fake, ugly fake, worthless as the people who made it. I held it up. This your warrant? Silence. Lewis, I said, leaning down. You understand you just crossed from trespass into felony territory? He swallowed dirt. Still nothing. I put my mouth near his ear, voice low enough to cut steel. You picked the wrong ranch. And the wrong soldier. That word soldier made him twitch, so he did know. Figures. You've got 2 choices, I said. Run, and Murphy's gonna find you before I do. And he won't be gentle. Pause. Or you talk, and maybe you get charged with fewer felonies than brain cells. He exhaled sharp. They said, you'd fold. Said you'd scare easy. That made me laugh. Slow, dark. You tell Karen, I said, hauling him to his feet. If she's sending in little spies to steal well maps, she'd better start sending bigger ones. Headlights crested the driveway. Deputy Ramirez's cruiser. Lewis went limp the second the deputy stepped out. Ramirez sighed when he saw the backpack. This is getting ugly. If I wanted ugly, I said, handing Lewis over, I'd have let them bring body bags. He didn't reply. Didn't need to. They cuffed Lewis and drove off, leaving a fading trail of dust and red-blue glow. I stood in the driveway, long after it went dark. The bait worked better than expected, because now I knew. HOA wasn't probing fences. They were coming for war. And next time, they wouldn't send a spy, they'd send the whole damn machine. Dawn broke over the ranch like someone pulling a sheet of gray silk across the sky. Quiet. Too quiet. Lewis being hauled off should have slowed them down. Instead, it told them exactly how desperate they needed to get. And desperate people with clipboards, those are the ones you watch closest. I was feeding cattle just after sunrise when the first vehicle rolled past my gate, not stopping, just crawling slow. Like a patrol dog sniffing a fence. Fire marshal didn't even pretend to hide the decals. 10 minutes later, white van with paw print logos. Animal control. Then a county truck stopped for 20 seconds at the edge of my fence and took photos of something I couldn't see from the yard. Tax assessor. Behind them, 2 code enforcement SUVs rolled by in single file, windows tinted, antennas shaking with washboard bumps. None of them got out. None asked questions. They didn't need to. This wasn't inspection. This was positioning. Like opening moves of a slow, deliberate encirclement. A bureaucratic pincer maneuver. a siege. But instead of rifles, they carried ordnances. Instead of mortars, they carried citations. From my porch, I watched dust clouds rise and fall as each vehicle crept down the road. I muttered to myself, 6 targets, no formation, but coordinated. HOA couldn't beat me with forged papers, couldn't beat me with spies sneaking into my barn. So they tried the one weapon that can take down any rancher, paperwork stacked by people who never set foot on dirt. The call came at 11:32 a.m. Unknown number. Austin area code. I answered. Is this Mr. Banner? A woman. Voice, polite, professional, brittle around the edges. Yes. This is Caroline at Lone Star Savings. I'm calling to inform you we've placed a temporary administrative freeze on all your accounts pending review of a civil claim. My stomach dropped, slow, cold, like sinking into a pond in winter. What civil claim? A lien request filed by Prairie Trails Homeowners Association for an outstanding balance of, she hesitated, $100,000. Of course, the magic number, the one they'd thrown at me on day one like a threat disguised as a welcome basket, and you froze my accounts based on a number submitted by an HOA that has no jurisdiction over my land? Silence. I'm just reading what's on the screen, sir. That's what they all say before the bomb goes off. Continue. She cleared her throat. It's temporary. Once the court verifies or rejects the claim, the hold will be revisited. And how long does that take? It could be several days. Days. Days without access to my money. Days without paying for feed, fuel, tools, repairs. Days unable to sell cattle or move inventory. Days trapped. HOA didn't need guns. They had a spreadsheet. I gripped the phone so tight I could hear it creak. Thank you, I said flatly, and hung up. Then I just stood there on the porch, staring at the southern fence line like it had personally betrayed me. For the first time since stepping foot back on Earl Banner's land, I felt the pressure, not fear, pressure, a slow, grinding force trying to squeeze a man into surrender, not with bullets, not with fists, with paper. I called Erica Mendez, the attorney who'd helped me sort Earl's estate. Sharp, blunt, the kind of lawyer who treated the law like a scalpel instead of a club. She answered on the second ring. What did they hit you with? Bank freeze, she swore under her breath. They're accelerating faster than I expected. Tell me something I don't know. Pause. Then, okay, if they want to choke you on paper, we're gonna slit their throat with it. I'm listening. You need leverage, legal standing, inside standing. I frowned. Inside what? Inside the HOA. I laughed once. Sharp. I'm not joining their circus. You're not joining, she corrected. You're infiltrating. She laid it out step by step. Prairie Trails HOA had a handful of zombie lots, tiny parcels inside their jurisdiction that nobody wanted. A 10th-acre sliver behind a greenbelt, a half lot next to a drainage ditch, a burned-out pad someone walked away from in 2012. Useless land. Worthless land. Land with no house, no driveway, no value. Except one thing. Owning one made you a full voting HOA member. We buy one through an LLC, Erica said. Quiet, fast. They won't see it coming. And what do I do with it? You request internal records, financials, contracts, minutes. You legally force them to hand you the guts of the beast. She paused. And then you strangle them with their own intestines. I stared out across the pasture. Wind pushed a long sheet of dust across the lower fields. A Trojan horse made out of dirt and bad surveying. I liked it. How fast can we move? I found a half lot listed at tax auction. $600. It's nothing but weeds and a broken swing set, but legally, it's a key to the castle. Buy it. I've got cash. Grandpa's emergency stash. She didn't ask how much. Smart woman. Done. I'll file the transfer under the LLC name Banner Ridge Holdings. Nobody will notice until it's too late. The line went quiet. Then she added softly, Cody, this is going to piss them off. Good. I said, I'm tired of playing defense. That afternoon, while my bank account sat locked like prison doors, I drove to a small clearing behind prairie trails, a piece of dirt nobody had wanted in 20 years, weeds up to my knees, rusted swing set creaking in the wind, ugly as sin, perfect. I stepped onto it, boots sinking into dry earth, and said out loud, "Welcome to the new front line." Because in a war built on paperwork, sometimes the sharpest weapon in the world is a worthless piece of land. And I had just bought the Trojan horse that would burn their kingdom to the ground. By the time I got back to the ranch, the day had bled out behind the ridge, sky going purple, shadows reaching long fingers across the yard. I walked into the house, dropped my keys on the table, and just stood there a moment. Bank accounts frozen, government trucks circling, Lewis hauled off, zombie lot purchased. It should have felt like progress. Instead, it felt like pressure. I went into the bedroom, lifted the old floorboard, and pulled out the steel box Earl had welded himself. Same weld pattern he used on every gate hinge on this ranch. Strong, simple, stubborn. Inside sat the real notebook. I set it on the table, opened it by lamplight. Cedar, dust, old ink, Earl's handwriting crooked and heavy, like he carved thoughts instead of writing them. The first pages were familiar. Well, depth records, flow notes, drought measurements. Then I turned to the map, a hand-drawn sketch of the ranch. Not to scale, but unmistakable. Fence lines, pastures, the windmill, and the southern well circled in thick pencil. But this time, I noticed something new, something I'd somehow missed before. A second ring, faint, partially erased, but there, a wider circle, perfectly smooth. Too smooth for Earl's hand, unless he'd traced something, a circle that matched exactly the red curve HOA had drawn on their annexation map. I leaned closer, then I saw the note scribbled tight beside the well. Not for them. My breath went still. Not for them. Who the hell was them in 1972? HOA didn't exist. Karen wasn't born. Prairie Trails wasn't even a rumor. Whatever Earl had circled, he wasn't hiding it from neighbors. He was hiding it from someone else. I turned the page. There, written darker, harder, was another line. Depth anomaly, not natural, metal, metal, at 40 feet, inside a well. There was only one explanation. The southern well wasn't for water. It was a vault, a burial, a damn secret Earl put in the ground and spent the next 40 years guarding. And HOA, through Pine and Mirror or whoever, had figured out just enough to know the well was valuable. I closed the ledger slowly, mind racing. If they wanted what was buried under the well, then they weren't waiting on lawsuits. They'd come for it. Maybe tonight. Maybe right now. Beep. A sensor chime cut through the silence. South pasture. Southern well. Right on cue. The dog on the porch started barking. Low, furious barks that told me he saw silhouettes, not squirrels. I grabbed my shotgun, killed the inside lights, and stepped into the night. No hesitation, no fear, just movement. The air outside was cool and sharp. Moonlight spilled across the pasture like cold milk. Sensor pinged again. South pasture, 100 yards out. I moved low, following the shadow of the fence line. Boots silent in dust. Recon mind switched on automatically. Count the lights. Count the voices. Count the shapes. I saw the first clue before I saw the men. A faint blue glow from a battery-powered flood lamp, half covered with a tarp to keep it dim. I got within 40 yards. Then I heard them. Voices. Low. Urgent. Scan says it's under 20 feet. Keep digging. We don't have long. Hurry before he... I crept closer through the brush. 3 figures, all wearing dark clothes. One operating a metal detector, the kind contractors use for utility lines. One digging with a long-handled post-hole digger. One holding the tarp over the lamp, scanning the area. Not HOA volunteers. Not trespassing teenagers. Professionals? No. Their stances were sloppy, tools handled wrong, pattern movement predictable. Not pros, but not randoms either, something in between. One of them stepped closer to the well casing and kicked it lightly. Feels hollow. Something's down there. Karen was right. Karen. Hearing her name hit me like ice. I raised the shotgun, sighting center mass on the closest one. Then I stepped out of the brush. Evening, boys. 3 heads snapped toward me. The one with the metal detector froze first, eyes wide. The digger dropped his tool. The lookout bolted instantly, ran toward the cedar line, stumbling over his own feet. Probably Murphy's idiot cousin. I aimed at the 2 remaining. Hands up, real slow, unless you want matching holes in your jackets. The metal detector man lifted his arms high. The digger raised his hands, shaking hard enough to rattle his teeth. You're trespassing, I said calmly, and you're digging on private property. My property? No harm meant, sir, the digger babbled. We're just contractors. No, I cut him off. You're thieves, and you're after something that doesn't belong to you. They stayed quiet. Good, because I wasn't finished. If any of you take one more step, I said. Lowering my voice to a cold growl, I start deciding who goes home and who goes in body bags. That got the point across. The lookout disappeared into the trees. Gone. But these 2, they weren't going anywhere. I motioned with the barrel. Sit, both of you, right there by the well. They obeyed. One whimpered. Pathetic. I stepped forward, keeping the shotgun trained, and looked down into the well. Fresh scrape marks on the concrete, shovel dents, mud disturbed. They weren't guessing. They'd been zeroing in, and that meant one thing. HOA wasn't searching. They were digging. They knew about the metal. They knew about the anomaly. They were trying to extract whatever Earl buried before I could understand it myself. The digger swallowed hard. Look, man, we don't want trouble. You've already got trouble, I said. You just haven't met all of it yet. I pulled out my phone, hit the sheriff's direct line, kept the shotgun steady. While it rang, I said quietly, this well, whatever's inside it, my grandfather didn't build it for you. Then I added even quieter, and neither did I. Blanco County Courthouse always reminded me of a tired old boxer. Scarred, stubborn, still standing. A good place for a fight. Inside, the benches were packed tighter than a Friday night bingo hall. On the left, Prairie Trails, HOA. Karen Sloan, in a white blazer so bright it hurt to look at. Lips pursed like she'd smelled sour milk. Her lawyer, Marcus Hollis, flipping papers with the confidence of a man who'd never fixed a fence post in his life. Behind them, Murphy, arms crossed, face red. Clipboard guy Denny, jittering like a nervous cricket. I saw Lewis sitting alone on a back bench. He looked smaller, without the lies. On my side, Deputy Ramirez, 2 ranchers, and Erica Mendez, sharp, calm, dangerous. Then the judge walked in. Big man, heavy voice, the kind who talked slow and hit hard. We all sat. Hollis went first. Your Honor, Prairie Trails has long maintained de facto oversight over the Banner acreage. This 1,997 agreement he lifted a document theatrically shows Mr. Banner's grandfather consenting to HOA authority and associated fees. Our lien is proper. He handed the paper forward like it was the Constitution. Judge skimmed it, said nothing. Then he nodded at Erica. She rose, eyes steady. Your Honor, that document is a forgery. A ripple went through the room. First, she said, placing Earl's original 1,953 deed on the projector, this property is explicitly excluded from any HOA jurisdiction unless the owner directly signs a future agreement. She clicked to the next slide. Prairie Trails HOA's corporate filing. Second, this HOA wasn't legally formed until 1999. Third, the signature on the 97 document does not match Earl Banner's verified signature. A forensic report appeared on screen, 2 signatures side by side. differences obvious. And finally, she zoomed in on the notary stamp. This stamp series wasn't issued until 5 years ago, meaning this 1997 agreement was manufactured recently. Hollis stood so fast he nearly knocked over his chair. That doesn't prove intent. It proves fraud, Erica snapped. Clear, sharp. The judge didn't stop her. She turned to a stack of transparency sheets. And now, Your Honor, we'll show you why Prairie Trails wanted this land so desperately. She placed the county plat on the overhead, then laid the HOA annexation map on top, the red line curving unnaturally. Then she placed Earl's hand-drawn map on top of both. 3 layers, 3 truths, all pointing to one thing: the southern well. Earl's circle lined up perfectly under the HOA's curved boundary. The same curved line Pine and Mirror used in their expansion request. The judge leaned forward. So their expansion conveniently includes your well? That's right, Erica said. And last week, 3 men were caught digging it up without permission. At night, she played a still frame from my thermal camera. 3 figures, shovels, a metal detector, the well casing. Murmurs filled the room. Your Honor, Erica said, voice steady, this wasn't about HOA fees. It was about obtaining whatever Mr. Banner's grandfather buried at that well decades ago. Judge nodded slowly. Let's hear from the gentleman in the back. Lewis froze, then stood. He was sworn in and took the stand, shoulders stiff. Mr. Carter, Erica said, did you pretend to be Mr. Banner's neighbor? Yes, ma'am. Who paid you? Pine and Mirror. They said it was consulting, but it wasn't. What did they want? They wanted access to the property. Maps, anything, mentioning the well. They said there was something metal down there and they needed it before Banner figured it out. Karen shot up in her seat. That is a lie. The judge slammed his gavel. Sit down, Erica continued. Did you enter Mr. Banner's barn at night? Yes. Did you carry a fake administrative order with an HOA logo? Yes. Was it signed by a judge? No. Who told you to use it? Lewis hesitated, then glanced at Karen. Miss Sloane's team. They told me the land would be HOA's soon anyway. That broke the room wide open. Murphy swore. Denny dropped his pen. Karen shook her head like she could rewind time. Judge removed his glasses. His voice dropped low. The lien is vacated. The bank freeze is lifted immediately. Prairie Trails HOA has no jurisdiction, none over Banner Ranch. Hollis tried to object. Judge cut him off. And based on evidence presented, this case is referred to the district attorney for criminal investigation, fraud, forgery, trespass, and conspiracy. Karen sprang to her feet, shouting, You don't understand. That land there's something under... Enough, the judge said. The bailiff approached. Karen jerked away and made the mistake of grabbing the bailiff's sleeve. That was it. Handcuffs. Immediate. Loud. Murphy sank into his chair. Denny looked like he wanted to crawl through the floor. As Karen was led past me, she glared like a cornered feral cat. You think you've won? She hissed. I leaned in just enough for her to hear. No, I said, but I think you're done losing quietly. The doors closed behind her, and, for the first time in weeks, the pressure around my chest eased. Not much, but enough to breathe. Walking out of the courthouse felt like stepping out of a storm shelter after a tornado. Things were calmer, but you knew the sky wasn't done throwing trouble yet. Karen was gone in cuffs. Hollis looked like a man quietly updating his resume. Murphy wouldn't even look up. But I didn't celebrate. Not yet. Winning a battle isn't winning a war. And Prairie Trails still had teeth. Money teeth. Paper teeth. Influence teeth. If I wanted this thing dead, I had to kill it from the inside. And lucky for me, I already had a foot inside the door. Erica and I stopped at her SUV. You realize, she said, this is where it gets fun. Fun for lawyers, fun for people who like pulling skeletons out of closets. She handed me a manila envelope. Inside, a printout. Banner Ridge Holdings, LLC, owner of Parcel 22B, Prairie Trails HOA member Active, my Trojan horse. A worthless half-lot with a rusted swing set turned into the key to their kingdom. Now what? I asked. Now, she said, you exercise your rights as a dues-paying member. She pulled out a stack of papers she'd already prepared. HOA bylaws require financial transparency to any member in good standing. You request full records, budgets, contracts, invoices, maintenance logs, vendor payments, consulting fees. She smiled. They have to comply within 10 days, and if they don't, the DA gets a second gift. I couldn't help smiling back. The next morning, I drove to the Prairie Trails HOA office, a glassy, overbuilt box sitting on land my grandfather would have used for storing hay. No Karen today. Just two board members who looked like they'd aged 5 years overnight. I handed them Erica's formal request letter. One of them tried to argue. I didn't say a word. Just pointed to the line that read, "Failure to comply constitutes a violation under Section 4, subsection D, subject to legal action." They took the papers. Didn't meet my eyes. Good. Fear is a decent substitute when respect runs out. 3 days later, they delivered the records. 2 boxes. Heavy. Dropped on my porch like they were trying to get rid of a bomb. I spent that night at the kitchen table going through them. Page after page. Line after line. Erica was right. This wasn't an HOA. It was a cash funnel. Repeated payments to Pine and Mirror Strategic Development. Vague consulting fees. No deliverables. $22,000 here. $38,000 there. A $45,000 security contract to a Shell LLC linked to Murphy. A boundary research payment to T. Gallagher Consulting Gallagher, the alias Lewis used. Every line pointed back to the same thing. They weren't managing a neighborhood. They were funding a dig. Every stolen dollar, every inflated invoice, every mysterious assessment fee had one purpose. Find the well, find what Earl buried, control it, profit from it. And once I owned Parcel 22B, I had the right to expose all of it. Erica helped me structure it clean. Legal. Devastating. We went public not with rumors, not with angry posts, with receipts. I launched a small website, prairietrailstruth.com. No commentary, no opinions, just documents. Scans of financial records, forged signatures, nighttime digging stills, vendor payments to ghost companies. Invoices for surveying performed at 2 a.m. on private property. The site hit every front porch in Coyote Ridge by sundown. Next morning, the town looked different. People didn't whisper about Prairie Trails anymore. They talked about it loudly, openly, angrily. A man at the hardware store slapped the paper on the counter. $45,000 to Murphy for what? Being fat? A woman at the diner shook her head. Pine and Mirror. They don't even have an office, just a P.O. box in Austin. Neighbors began filing withdrawal letters. 5 families the first day. 7 the next. Property values dipped. Realtors panicked. Board members started resigning by email. The HOA board scrambled. Held an emergency meeting in their clubhouse, a place with more wine racks than light bulbs. I showed up early. Why wouldn't I? I was a member now. When I walked in, half the room stiffened. The other half simply looked defeated. Erica whispered, "Be polite." "Polite?" I said. "Sure." The chairwoman Karen's stand-in cleared her throat. "Mr. Banner, is there something you want to bring before the board?" I nodded, stood. Read one sentence. "I hereby file a motion under Article 12, Section D, to dissolve Prairie Trails Homeowners Association." The room erupted. Shouting, accusations, people pointing fingers. Karen said it was all legal. She forged half the paperwork. Should have known when she hired Murphy. It took 20 minutes for the noise to die. Then the vote was called. Simple majority. Hands went up. Dozens. Only 3 stayed down. Motion passed. Just like that. Prairie Trails HOA was done. Dead. Not with a gunshot. Not with a standoff. With a vote. A vote I had forced using a $600 piece of worthless dirt. That's the thing about wars. Sometimes the smallest lever flips the biggest machine, and I had just flipped theirs. Prairie trails didn't die with the vote. The vote just knocked the air out of it. What killed it came the next 3 days. Fast, messy, loud. Murphy cracked first. Showed up at the county office, sweating through his shirt, insisting he needed to clarify his earlier statements. The sheriff didn't even let him finish before putting him back in an interview room. By noon, he'd admitted to taking HOA cash, escorting Pine and Mirror crews, and giving Lewis access to private lots at night. When they asked why, he said, Karen said the well was worth millions, said it had something that could change the entire South Tract. Millions. For water? No one believed that. Not anymore. Then Pine and Mirror folded like wet cardboard. 2 guys in Austin sent the DA a chain of emails with subject lines like, "For cooperation considerations," and "Evidence attached." Attached were voice clips of Karen. In one, she said, "Once we absorb Banner, we reframe the boundary lines. The old survey marker won't matter if nobody can find it." There it was. The tell. They weren't stealing land for dues. They were stealing it to erase something. Something Earl didn't want erased. On the 3rd day, 2 contractors approached my fence line like guilty altar boys. "We didn't know," one said. "We thought it was all legal." They handed me a folder of texts and diagrams. Instructions for digging at night. Coordinates near the well. Depth estimates. Murphy's old badge number listed as authorization. And a note that read, "After retrieval, fill and reseed immediately. No trace. Retrieval. Not inspection. Not survey. Retrieval." I knew then. Lewis hadn't told me everything, and tonight he was going to. The jail interview room was the color of old toothpaste and smelled like fear. Lewis sat across from me, hands clasped, eyes red from no sleep. "You got your deal," I told him. "Reduced charges if you're useful. So, be useful." Lewis swallowed. There was something down there. Something Earl hid. Money? No. Documents? He shook his head. "It's older. More important. A marker." My pulse kicked. "A survey marker?" Lewis slid a folded sheet of paper across the table. Hand-drawn. Shaky lines. Depth notes at the bottom. Vault below. Primary stone ring. Metal protected. I stared at him. "You're telling me my grandfather built a vault?" Lewis nodded. He knew the county was changing maps in the 70 seconds. He told someone he wasn't going to let them rewrite history, so he buried the truth. I exhaled slowly, and Karen wanted to destroy it. She wanted to move it, or pull it, or hide it. I don't know. But she knew the moment you found it, they were done. The room felt colder. "What's in the vault?" I asked. Lewis licked his lips. "The original survey point. The 1,952 marker, the one that sets the entire south boundary line." He paused. "You dig that up, and half her development ends up on the wrong side of the law." There it was. Not gold, not diamonds. The truth. Earl had buried the truth. I walked out of the jail before dark. No shotgun, no anger. Just purpose. Back at the ranch, I grabbed a rope, a pry bar, my big floodlight, and Earl's old leather gloves. Then I walked to the well. The cicadas hummed like they knew what I was about to find. The well looked ordinary. Stone ring, cedar posts, a pulley older than statehood. But I'd grown up climbing around this thing. I knew its sounds, its shadows, its secrets. And now I knew Earl had left something for me. I knelt, ran my hand along the inner stone ring. At first, nothing. Then a scratch, a faint groove, a mark I'd never noticed as a kid. 3 short lines. Earl's way of saying, "Right here." I jammed the pry bar in the seam and leaned my weight into it. The stone shifted, quiet, stubborn, then moved. A panel swung inward like a hinge. Behind it, a metal plate, dull and cold, covered in decades of mineral dust. Stamped on it, State Survey 1,952. Permanent marker, do not alter. My breath caught. Below the plate was a sealed metal cylinder wrapped in rubber hydrocoat, still intact. I pulled it free. It wasn't heavy. Truth rarely is. Inside, etched on a brass rod, were the original coordinate lines. The real ones. The ones Earl had trusted more than the county. The ones Prairie Trails had been trying to bury under paperwork and bulldozers. This little rod, this simple piece of brass, told the whole story. My landline was correct. HOA land wasn't. Karen's house, the clubhouse, the South cul-de-sac, they were all built on false data. This was the reason they came. This was the reason they forged documents. This was the reason they sent Lewis in with a fake neighbor smile. This was the reason they dug at 2 a.m. This was the thing Earl died protecting. I stood there a long time. Texas night around me. Wind humming through the grass. The vault open. The marker in my hands. And for the first time since coming home, I didn't feel hunted. I felt chosen. Earl hadn't buried this to hide it. He buried it for me to find. Tomorrow, Prairie Trails would face the truth they tried to erase. Tonight, I carried it home. The morning after Prairie Trails finally collapsed, I went back to the only thing that ever mattered, the land. I set new oak posts at the gate myself. Heavy, straight, stubborn like Earl used to be. The hinges groaned once when I lifted the gate into place, then settled like they recognized home. No fancy HOA stonework, no fake suburban charm, just wood, steel, truth. I bolted the sign I'd carved the night before. Private land. Respect it or keep moving. It felt right. The brass survey marker, Earl's Buried Truth, sat wrapped in an old oil rag on my tailgate. For a long moment, I held it in my hand. It wasn't treasure, it wasn't gold, it was proof. The first and last honest line ever drawn across this land. I walked to the well and lowered it back into the vault Earl built, not hiding it, restoring it. Right where you put it, old man, I said, right where it belongs. By late afternoon, folks started showing up. Nobody invited them. Didn't need to. Word had spread. Leanne gone. Charges filed. HOA dead. Old Dawes came first, carrying something wrapped in a feed sack. He set it on the porch and pulled the sack away. A cast iron mailbox with Earl's name rusted onto the side. Figured it was time this came home, he said. We bolted it back to the post where the HOA had ripped it down years ago. Erica arrived next, jacket off, hair loose. For once looking like she wasn't carrying the legal weight of Texas on her shoulders. She held up a thin folder, DAs moving forward, Pine and Mirror flipped, Murphy's singing, "You did good, Cody." I nodded. We all did. Soon the yard filled. Neighbors. Ranchers. Even a couple of deputies. Someone brought brisket. Someone else cobbler. The kind of little Texas gathering that feels like stitching the world back together by hand. Kids ran through the dust, adults leaned on porch rails, finally breathing easy. For the first time since I'd come home, the ranch didn't feel like a battleground. It felt alive again. And Earl would have liked that. Of course, someone demanded a speech. "Come on, Banner, get on up there." They shoved a crate my way. I stepped onto it, hat pushed back, evening wind cutting warm across the porch. "I'm no speaker," I said. "But I'll say this. My granddad didn't leave me money. He left me a line." I pointed at the new gate, and he taught me one thing. Never let anyone redraw it for their convenience. I paused. This place didn't survive because it's big. It survived because it had people willing to stand on it. Folks nodded. A few clapped. It was enough. When the last truck rolled away and the stars came out, I walked the fence line one more time. Habit more than worry now. At the end, by the gate, I hung the last sign. Carved slow and deep. Banner Ranch. Freedom lives here. I stepped back, hands on my hips, breathing in the warm Texas dark. For the first time in a long damn while, the land felt right, and I planned on keeping it that way.